fact that this room is completely full is a testament to your commitment to the growth of this country. And I'm absolutely thrilled to have the opportunity to talk to you today about what is happening on the landscape of the world economy that will affect Guatemala. So the first thing I want to say is it's very easy for us human beings to try to do prediction. We try to guess what will happen in the future. But actually, thank you so much. But actually being prepared for a wide range of possibilities is a much smarter way to go. And right now, many things are happening which are going to create unexpected outcomes for this part of the world. So let me explain how the flows of the world economy are moving in a direction that will make it easier for Guatemala to have a better success story going forward. You have resources that the world is deeply interested in. But in the past, we valued some assets more when they were dead than when they are alive. So forests, for example. In the past, we put a high value on a dead forest. Cut the tree down, take it away. Today, the world places a high value on an alive forest. This is a whole different way of thinking about the value of what you have. Also, you have a very ancient culture. You have a very profound ancient history. When I studied Guatemala, I was impressed that you are one of the few countries that has still a very large indigenous population. That way of thinking, that connection to our history and to nature is going to be a huge value added for Guatemala, as you will see in my remarks. So the first thing is we're going to head into the world economy and we're going to think about preparing for many possibilities, not one possibility. Because right now, every nation is literally racing for the technological frontier. And you will be a beneficiary of that, even if you don't discover new things yourselves. Others are discovering things that are going to make your economy progress. One of the interesting things is that Mexico has effectively become the new China. Mexico is now the deepest source of supply chains into the United States. It is particularly in the automotive sector, but it turns out Mexico has extremely high quality control. And the close proximity with the United States means it's much easier for the US manufacturers to deal with. Now, if Mexico is the new China, then is Guatemala a new Vietnam? Is it going to be a beneficiary of this immense relationship between the most dynamic emerging market and the most dynamic industrialized economy? Yes. So when we think about where are cars being made, where is advanced manufacturing happening, it's happening very close to you. So you can be a part of it. In the US, we hear lots of stories in our newspapers about the migration issue from the South into the North. Lots of talk in politics about the wall. But what no one mentions is all the American entrepreneurs who are getting in private jets flying south, trying to find the new places in Mexico and in Central America where they want to build new operations. That's where our focus should be. And also, let's remember that chip production is not only in Taiwan anymore. It is also in Texas and Arizona. And I was impressed when I heard the Vice Minister talk about your efforts to become involved in chip production. It doesn't mean you have to be at the cutting edge of making chips. It means there's a place for this country in the supply chain of chips. And given your relationship with Taiwan, that's a very interesting route that you're on. Now, how are we going to do all this innovation when we live in a world with massive debt? The level of global debt is 3 times the level of global GDP. Every country has this problem. China has a debt problem. Europe has a debt problem. The United States has a debt problem. So how do we address that? Well, making it worse, we live in a time where headlines are telling us that geopolitics is becoming quite intense, very difficult to manage. So are these really obstacles, or are they things we can manage? So I would say they are. And a decision has been taken with the new White House in Washington that we have a choice about how we enter the future. One is to be in Star Wars. In a Star Wars world, we go to war with people. But then there's a Star Trek world. In Star Trek, we go to war with problems. Almost all young people that I know in the tech sector are like, Star Trek, that's where we want to go. We don't want to fight with people over things. We want to fight with problems. And I think that's the direction we're going, but I'll explain. The Secretary of the Treasury in the United States comes from a deep financial market background. And he is bringing a creative thinking to finance that we have not seen in many decades. So his view is we need to innovate with money, not just with tech, but with money itself. And so the United States has announced we are going to legalize stablecoins, Bitcoin, and crypto. More importantly, we're going to be creating a Bitcoin reserve and encouraging every bank and every business to start issuing stablecoins. Now, why? Why will this help? When you have a debt problem that's so big that you cannot ever pay the debt back, you have limited options. How are you going to deal with it? You can just default, but the markets are not very friendly after you do that. You can say, I'll pay you back a little bit later, but a little bit less. This is what Greece did a few years ago. Do we have any Greeks anywhere in the audience? And it worked for Greece because they're a relatively small country. But it's not going to work for the United States or for China or for Europe. You can default on your own citizens. You can say, I know I told you you could retire at 65, but now the retirement age is going to be 93. Everybody has felt that, right? This is a default on your own citizens. And then you can always try inflation. That's a way of defaulting. But all of these are vote losers. All of these cause pain for the general public. And so we're trying something new, which is get rid of the old system of money and accounting and update it with a new one. And the new one involves Bitcoin, because that is a transfer of power from politicians to algorithms. And we can have a big debate about whether that's smart or not smart, but that's what it is. And stablecoins are a way of allowing the public to become more deeply involved in the financing of startups and new ventures and innovation. So when we talk about, but wait, what happens to the dollar? There's so much discussion that the dollar is finished, that America isn't going to be the reference currency anymore. But actually, the opposite is happening, because stablecoins will be convertible into US dollars, and they will be collateralized by US treasuries. So this strategy is creating a huge demand to buy US treasuries and US dollars. Ironically, what it means is this new DeFi, decentralized finance, is being used to refinance the sovereign balance sheet. It's also about displacing Wall Street and Silicon Valley. Because Wall Street and Silicon Valley traditionally give money to very, very few businesses. And the businesses that get their money, they fail 95% of the time. So the success rate is very tiny. So the Secretary of Treasury says, this is a bad system. We need to get more money to more startups and have a higher success rate. Traditionally, your only path was raise money from the venture capitalists, go to an IPO, go onto the stock market, and that was the only avenue you had. But today, with stablecoins, there's going to be a pathway for a new generation of ventures. So think about it this way. Venture capital and Wall Street, they want unicorns. They want businesses that are going to be worth $1 billion US dollars really quickly. But how many of them are there? Not very many. With the stablecoin approach, they can start to finance what you can call workhorses. A workhorse is what most Latin American businesses are. That's a real business with a real product, with real customers, with real cash flow. Traditionally, they were really hard to raise money for. But with this strategy, the workhorses can raise capital more easily than the unicorns. And what does a workhorse look like in the modern era? It's not necessarily a big corporation. More and more, it's an individual entrepreneur who's working in new and unconventional ways. More and more, it's a digital nomad who isn't even based in one location. They're creating global businesses from literally the beach. Now, Sam Altman and Elon Musk, as you know, are constantly fighting. But they agree on one thing. They agree the next generation of billion-dollar businesses will be led by one or a few people. That's the world that we're now in. Small groups of people can create huge amounts of wealth. This also means that little businesses here, grocery store chains, or tequila brands, or beer brands from our sponsor, it should be easier for them to expand by raising capital than it is today. I think with stablecoins, we're going to find it's a much easier world for raising that kind of money. So there's a broad landscape, but it gets more exciting. The next thing you say is, wait, it can't be much more exciting. The US and China are fighting each other. Well, yes and no. They are negotiating with each other. And yes, the United States has a super aggressive policy on tariffs now. But part of that is about fixing the US debt problem. So this is why the president says, if I can raise more capital from tariffs, which, by the way, is how we raised all of our revenue before 1914. It's only after 1914 and the creation of the Federal Reserve that we started to have income tax. So the president wants to say, we're going to go back to the old days, raise more of our money from tariffs, and then we can go to the American public and say, we can lower your income tax. And if we can lower your income tax, then you have more money to build new ventures. And that's a vote winner. So now instead of the Internal Revenue Service, you also have the External Revenue Service. But it's also about applying leverage to get a better trading relationship with the global partners. Think about it this way. When the White House announced the huge tariffs on China, 185%, was it really aimed at China? Or was it aimed at the US corporations? I think the president would say, the problem is American companies moved all the jobs to China, but then they paid the Chinese workers nothing. And they kept all the money offshore, so there was no tax. So this is not good for Chinese workers. It's not good for American workers. And I think that the Communist Party in China has heard this and understands there's an effort to try to improve the labor wages, not just for Americans, but for China as well. And there's an invitation in this, an invitation to Chinese companies to build in the United States. Now you say, that's crazy, that won't happen, but it already has. Haier, which is a huge Chinese company, they make electrical goods, white goods, refrigerators, things like that. They moved production to North Carolina 15, 20 years ago. They became so successful in the United States that they bought General Electric's household appliances division for $5.5 billion US, and they still run it now. Toyota. Everyone said, Toyota, you can't make cars in the United States. Well, they moved to Lexington, Kentucky, and they are making the most profitable cars with the highest US content of any automaker in the world. So it can be done. So this fight between US and China maybe is starting to be resolved by this new approach. Again, both sides are saying, do we want to really fight each other? Do we really want kinetic conflict between the United States and China? I don't think anybody wants that. They both want Star Trek, not Star Wars. Both sides are saying, let's devote our energy to solving problems, and we can at a record pace because of technology. So let me explain a few technical developments that are interesting. You talk a lot about energy, and you have an advantage in energy here in Guatemala. Have you thought at all about space? Currently, we see the United States and China racing to build what we call space-based solar power. China is building this massive physical platform in orbit to catch the sun's rays, convert them to radio waves, and be able to beam power into any power grid anywhere in the world at any time. Clean, green energy. This is going to transform the world economy. It may take time, but it's coming. Also, why are we racing to the moon? It's not just joyriding by billionaires. It's also that if you want to do nuclear fusion, you need helium-3. And helium-3 is very rare on Earth, but you can find it in large amounts on the moon. So suddenly, the idea of having unlimited, inexpensive energy in any power grid is no longer like crazy. It's coming. It's being built. And nuclear, we're already talking about using small nuclear reactors, the kind that have been powering submarines for decades. This is a radical change in energy. But it's also resources. For example, we're doing asteroid mining. Now that sounds like science fiction, but it's already happening. The first private mission to an asteroid to mine it for resources happens in 3 years. Now there's one particular asteroid called Psyche. As just an example, It's said that the value of the assets on Psyche, the gold, lithium, cobalt, is literally 90 times the value of global annual GDP. If you were to distribute the value of Psyche alone to every human on Earth, everyone would be a billionaire. So imagine a world where resources are ubiquitous and abundant. So now we have abundant energy, we have abundant resources. Imagine too that mining and refining don't need to happen on Earth. We are building currently ways of doing that in orbit. This is no longer about dreaming. This is reality. This is a world where robotics will increasingly do the work. Space won't be about astronauts. It'll be about self-assembling, self-replicating, AI-led robotics. And so now we can imagine a world where we can have all the resources required to make an MRI scanner, or to make an iPhone, or to build a fighter jet. This is what we have to open our minds to. Now add to that, interplanetary internet. This has already been constructed. Why do we care about that? Because we're going to be running manufacturing operations not here on Earth. More importantly, imagine a Guatemala where every square inch of the country has access to world-class Wi-Fi. That will lift the value of every part of the country, and it will allow you to not only work from anywhere, but it will allow you to track assets in distant places. This is a game changer for an economy like Guatemala. Now, let me give you an example of why this matters. Because I know from just being here the last few days, you seem to think of Guatemala as a small country with limited power. Technology is totally changing that. You're not a small country anymore. You have the potential to do powerful things. So, Rwanda in Africa. Rwanda is a tiny country compared to Guatemala. Rwanda had a genocide only 10 years ago, 15 years ago. Rwanda decided the only way to recover from that fight is to go super high tech. They said, let's be like Singapore. And they said, we're part of the fastest growing continent, Africa, with the youngest demographics. But there's no Pan-African internet. There's no Pan-African airline. So we'll build it. Now, how does a tiny country like Rwanda build what will be the largest mega constellation of satellites? They currently are on track to have over 3,000 satellites. Well, they realized we don't have to pay for them, we don't have to build them, we don't have to launch them. We just want the data. And because we're a country, we can apply for the permission to have the slots in space. Guatemala can do exactly the same thing. There is nothing stopping Guatemala from going to the International Telecommunications Union and saying, we want our satellite spots. And then you open it up to the market. Who wants to finance it? Who wants to launch? But you would get the data. And the data is the new gold. The data is the new valuable thing. So suddenly, very remote places that seemed hard and had no value, in the world I'm describing, they will become valuable. So this is a way of changing how we think. Plus, basic things like housing, right here on Earth. 3D printers are radically transforming our capacity to build. There's a company in Texas called Icon. Icon has the mandate to build the first structures on the moon, but they're already building whole neighborhoods in Austin. These 3D printed houses are much less expensive than traditional homes, and now they're being equipped with Tesla Powerwall. What does that mean? It means everybody's home suddenly becomes a cash machine, because you generate not only all the power that you need for free from the sun, but you actually sell your excess power back to the grid. So suddenly the consumer, who was the customer of an energy grid, is now becoming the supplier. This turns your house into a cash machine. This is a radical transformation. Add what's happening with stablecoins. Recently in Texas, something like 2,000 people got together on Homebase, which is a stablecoin platform. They decided to buy one house, $250,000 US house. Some people had $20, some people had $200, some people had $2,000. They all put the money in and they bought the house. And each person gets a percentage of the rental flow proportionate to what they put in. This is a revolution in how we'll finance housing going forward. So these are already happening right now. But I'm going to tell you about an even bigger revolution that is unfolding right in front of us. And that is our relationship with reality itself. In the past, we had to start with a material, like a tree. I use trees because you have so many. And we cut the tree down to make a boat, or a desk, or a chair. But that we don't have to do that anymore, because now we are discovering that we are not only going up into space, we're going down into atomic and subatomic levels of reality. We are learning how to make things at that level. We are literally given the power to create and destroy with atoms themselves. And so suddenly, it's not just atoms, it's molecules, it's DNA. So if we start with what would I like to create, and we use artificial intelligence, and we use supercomputing, and suddenly we're able to create new materials that have never been seen before. Google, with their new Willow chip, a new quantum chip, they have already discovered 380,000 new materials no human has ever seen before. 2 million new crystals no one has ever seen before. What will we create? We don't know yet. It's a very exciting time. So we add artificial intelligence with supercomputing, and suddenly we have huge new possibilities. Add to that the cost of compute is falling to almost nothing. Add to that we have a new generation of artificial intelligence and computer chips that are much more capable than anything we've ever seen in history. For example, I mentioned the Google Willow chip. Already, the estimate is that they gave this chip a problem that traditionally would have taken all of human history to solve. This chip solves the same problem in 5 minutes. How do you go from the whole history of the universe to 5 minutes to get your solution? The Chinese are building exactly the same thing. So any problem that you have, it's going to get solved. The interesting thing is, which problems are you going to ask to be solved? Add to that, the next generation of artificial intelligence will not be words on a screen anymore. The next generation will be physical. So you will say, we need new housing in Guatemala City. And we're going to set the parameters of why, where, and then AI, physical AI, will just build it. So AI won't be words on a screen, it's going to be physical stuff gets built before your eyes. This will happen much faster now that we have what they call PINs, physics-informed neural networks. This is a whole new world that we're now in. Now, in this world that I'm describing, most of us in the audience have been trained with analytical skills. But what's really required in this new world are imaginal skills, not what we've mainly been trained to do. Younger people are better at this, and they can envisage a future that seems impossible to older people. This involves changing the way we think. And humanity is moving away from the purely rational, scientific, analytical, and more into the imaginal, the creative, the qualitative, and even facing mystery, beginning to understand that maybe the universe works differently than we had assumed. And so I would argue, if you want to secure the future of Guatemala, you must begin dreaming better. You must begin using your imagination better. And I love this quote from Mark Twain, that the eyes cannot see clearly if the imagination is out of focus. And in a world where those stable coins provide a new way to finance imagination, new things become possible on a scale that is unimaginable in the past. What I'm talking about is a genuine shift from a world dominated by scarcity to a world dominated by abundance. Now, there are technical problems. And what are those technical problems? Well, we definitely have an issue of war. War is bearing down on the superpowers. We tend to think that that's just the fight in Ukraine, for example. But actually, it's a global phenomena. And whatever happens with those drones in Ukraine provoking a response will have an impact on us all. And so when we think about the problems of the Middle East or the problems of Ukraine, we can't really say that's over there and we're over here, so it's not about us. Because it is. Everything is interconnected. And there's a reason that right now, I think my video's not launching. Let's see, can you get that to launch, guys? Right now, we have pretty much an armada of the United States Navy right off the coast of Venezuela. Now, what is that about? Why? Interestingly, it's because the White House understands in the negotiation with Hamas and Hezbollah to get the hostages returned, where are their cash flows coming from? Latin America, tri-border area, Venezuela. So suddenly Latin America is in the middle of global geopolitics. It is not separate from this. Now that can be an advantage, especially in a world where China has said, actually, we don't want to end up in a nuclear conflict. China's been crystal clear, no nukes, no conflict between the superpowers at that level. So what does that mean? It means the beginning of a new conversation between the United States and China. One part of that conversation, in my opinion, is the US is saying China needs to grow. It has 1.67 billion people. How are they going to have a better future if they're not selling their products to the United States? Well, one way is China expands into what is the east of Russia. Now that is happening. Every day we're getting announcements about China investing in the infrastructure of Russia's east. Russia has to say this is fantastic because nobody's ever invested in the east of Russia before. China says this is actually great because what do we need? Siberia has everything: water, protein, raw materials, forestry, access to the Arctic, which is now critical for moving goods from China into Europe. Most of Americans don't even know where this geography is. So no American is going to say, I have a problem with this. But for China to know that the United States will not object if they expand, by the way, into territory that traditionally they were very involved in anyway. And Russia says, thank you very much for the investment. So this is a geopolitical deal. So when you here in Guatemala talk about how do we get more foreign direct investment, sometimes it's geopolitical deals that get you more FDI, not just better performing opportunities. As for China, their view is, we don't want to go to war. We want to go back to a world where China was vibrant. Frankly, we just want to go back to making money again. Can we just make some money again? We don't have the demographics for having a war. We don't want to waste the resources of our country on a fight. So is it possible that actually, in spite of the harsh words, we're actually migrating towards some kind of a deal between the US and China? And if that happens, who's a beneficiary? I would say that you are. You will be a beneficiary. Now, in history, how do these big fights always get resolved? Same way every time. It's always a hug. It always ends in a hug. People say, that's not possible. You can't have a geopolitical fight that ends in a hug. But actually, it literally always does. This is the impossible outcome that we have to think about. This is the thing where you say, I can't devote time and energy to this possibility. It seems so remote. But if we're going to do preparedness instead of prediction, I think you need to think about what happens to your part of the world if we get a nice hug between the United States and China. I also think the technologies that I've described are so powerful that the US and China agree they cannot be used in a war. Our nuclear weapons are vastly more powerful today than they were in 1945. But we have even other technologies, hypersonic missiles, where you only have a few minutes before an impact. So the human element here is more powerful technologies actually demand spiritual elevation. The more powerful our technologies are, the more we have to think about the human impact. Artificial intelligence needs to be offset or balanced out by human intelligence. And so what I'm describing is a world where we can literally invent the future. We can write the story. We can choose how to design the outcome. Your Vice Minister of Economics, just here on the stage, said we have to decide what kind of Guatemala do we want, and then we can design it. This is absolutely correct. That means we have to get better at what I would call techplexity. That means not just knowing your specific technology, but many technologies and the interactions between them. Because it's the relationship between all these technologies that tells us what the possibilities really are. Now, this is hard in a world where the White House or American politics is totally split. Which side are you dealing with? Well, in a way, everything's changed so dramatically. This president is no longer about left or right. This is about an old establishment giving way to a new anti-establishment. Both the left and the right are upset with Trump making all sorts of announcements, but really this is about America saying the old left-right fight is over. The new fight is for the technological frontier. And we're going through a difficult time in the US, maybe something like what the Russians went through at the end of the Soviet Union, an American glasnost, where we're looking at our history and asking questions about who did what and who's to blame and how did we get here. But the good news is, after you get through this process, what is on the other side? It's building a new future. And the young people are saying more and more, politics is so awful, I don't even want to be part of that. I'm just going to build my own future. And they're building it all over the world. They are literally running incredible global enterprises from a laptop at a beach. This is becoming normal. This is the future. And they are betting on the fact that the price of everything is going to keep falling because of these technological innovations. And so I'll finish with this. You're familiar, of course, in your history with Westerners coming here and to Latin America digging for gold. And we used to say that the value wasn't in the gold, it was in the tools to get the gold. The shovel, you wanted to sell shovels rather than be a gold miner. So where is the gold of today? I think the answer is people. It's the human capital. And we vastly underestimate the ability of human beings to imagine and to create, to take advantage of the tools that are in the mobile phone in their pocket. This is the new gold. In an artificial intelligence and supercomputing world, you don't need a huge amount of capital to create immense value. This is the future. So this is a video that's not quite launching, but I'm sure we've all seen kids playing on phones, right? We all see our kids and we say, what are you doing goofing off with those phones? The answer is they are learning. They are understanding how to make the phone pay them. They're understanding the interconnectedness of this world globally. We have a lot to learn from these kids who are learning how to use the supercomputers in our pocket to build extraordinary things. And we need them to have those skills because in the world I'm describing, digital skills become more important. They literally will be the opponent as well as the solution. So we got to build these skill sets in our population. So when we look at the world, what I see is an incredibly bright future. I see a lot of people who are very worried about change. They're afraid that automation, robotics are going to steal their jobs. They're not seeing a world where the price of housing, the price of energy, the price of raw materials will all come down to the point that it doesn't cost anything, pretty much. So I like this Buddhist saying that suffering comes from having an argument with reality, but evolution comes from adapting. So the question is, how is Guatemala going to adapt? Now, you happen to come from a culture that has these indigenous people, and they all say, whether you're talking to Aboriginals in Australia or the Navajo in the United States, they all say, there are two realities. There's the one where I'm on stage and you're in your seat and we're here. And they're like, it's kind of strange, but you're in this most of the time. But the important things in your life will happen in the dream space. It's when you dream and when you imagine the future. That is where the juice is. And it's interesting that here in Guatemala, you have people who live with these dreaming skills, who understand imagination. And I mentioned this earlier in the day, and I was told about a group here in Guatemala that represents women who are making these bracelets. This one is called Dream. I think it's called Wakamiko. And Maria Pacheco from your board was one of the founders of this. The money that's raised from selling these bracelets is already allowing young girls to go to universities. That seems an impossible task 20 years ago, and now it's happening. So when I say Guatemala has certain very specific advantages in this new high-tech world that I'm talking about, one of them is you have a human intelligence to match the artificial intelligence that's being developed. And you have a deep, deep history of wisdom that has been developed over many centuries. And the question is, how can Guatemala take these natural, raw resources, deep history, deep understanding of dreaming, incredible assets of nature, proximity to Mexico and the United States, connection with the semiconductor industry. These are all huge advantages. And the important thing is for you to begin imagining what is the future that you want, because designing it now is so much easier than it's ever been in history. So rather than feeling fear about all this, I recommend you lean into the wonder of this moment that technology is delivering and making it possible for Guatemala to have the ability to write its own story. So my question to you is what the Vice Minister asked. What is the Guatemala you want? Because you can create it. I'll leave you with that. Thank you so much.